Here we are at the ACM's second webinar on their latest Forest and Farmers first EUDR compliance solutions webinar. It's hosted by the ACM along with its partners Origin, Demeter Holdings, and Aya Data. I'm Anthony Myers. Hello, your moderator today, and today we're joined by Peter Murray, a South African property law expert who leads legal compliance framework for ACM's Forest and Farmers First Solutions. And of course, we are also joined by Dr. Christy Lesile, founder and CEO of the African Cocoa Marketplace, and she'll be discussing how ACM solutions can help operators. Right, this is purposely a 30-minute webinar, and we have given ourselves a challenge this week because we are focusing on the legal compliance for cocoa operators regarding the impending EUDR legislation. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat box and we'll answer as many as possible in the time allocated. We do have some pre-submitted questions, which is going to shape this webinar over the next 30 minutes. But first, let's start with Peter for a quick recap overview on the EUDR, which we covered in our first webinar, which is still available online. So Peter, really, my first question is, what is legal compliance? The deforestation element gets all the attention, but can you remind us what legal compliance means for EUDR purposes specifically? And what advice can you offer operators?
Thanks, Tony. Yes, it's really interesting, and I think it came as a bit of a surprise to many people in the industry. As you say, the regulations, the name of the regulations make you think that these are anti-deforestation regulations. But it's very clear from the regulations that there is a component under Article 3 where the due diligence statements have to be submitted, which says that you also have to carry out legal compliance in respect of the commodity which is being imported into the union. It's quite an extensive list of legal compliance issues that you have to go through. One of the issues is land use rights. So, for example, you would have to as an operator, you would have to make sure, you would have to certify to the union that there's nothing untoward with the land use rights, the property is correctly zoned, that the person who is farming the land actually has the legal right to farm the land. There's an environmental component, so you would have to certify that the farmer is complying with all environmental laws. There's also laws about third-party rights that could, for example, could be a bank that's lent money to the farmer. There's a section on labor rights, and you also have to certify that the human rights are protected under international law. So it's quite an expansive list of legal compliance issues that an operator would have to certify that the farmer complies with. It's difficult to offer advice under circumstances where the system isn't live yet. But the kind of methodology which we are developing at ACM is to establish a legal framework for each country, because obviously the complicating factor is that the laws of each country are completely different. So we are establishing a methodology where we have a framework for all these different laws under this category for each different country, and then a scoring system to make sure that the particular farmer who is exporting that commodity into the union complies with the legal requirements of the regulations.
Okay, thank you. We just before coming on air, we had a couple more last-minute questions, one of which is quite relevant, and I'm going to put this to you, Peter. Basically, who formally owns the data? And the question was in relation to the technical data produced for georeferencing and geolocation of farms in line with the EUDR compliance requirements. Do we know who is formally the owner of the data?
That's a great question, and again, without a live system, it's a little bit difficult to answer. However, you know, again, obviously, it's a difficult system in that an operator has to certify that the farmer who has produced the product is compliant with the anti-deforestation components and the legal components. So the data would be collected from the farmer. However, it's data that the operator requires in order to land goods in the union. So under those circumstances, my understanding is that the data would be owned by the operator, However, obviously that might vary from country to country, where countries have specific privacy laws insofar as data is concerned. But generally, broadly speaking, the data would be owned by the operator. And then obviously the operator could have a mandate with an authorized representative. And that mandate agreement must always at all times be available for the EU to look at. And that mandate agreement might from time to time change the fact as to who owns the data legally.
Okay, thank you. And we had another very last minute question again, very good. And I think I'll put this out to Christy, because you've been in Ghana just very recently. You're just back from a trip there, and it's a very interesting question. Maybe Peter can chip in as well with this. But the question is, a key requirement for complying with the EUDR is to ensure compliance with all relevant national legislation in the country of origin of the specific product. And they're asking, the person who sent this question in, through your research, do you have any country examples where a formal structure and procedure of verification of national legislation compliance is in place or being put in place to facilitate this element of EUDR? Our origin countries prepared, I guess, for on their side now, at the beginning of the chain. Is it, Christy? Do you have anything on that through your research?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And the only example that I'm aware of and would speak with confidence about is cocoa in Ghana, because their Ghana Cocoa Board has said very clearly that they will ensure that all cocoa being produced in Ghana is legally compliant. And they also have a set of attributes that they're measuring on the deforestation side. We haven't yet seen their list of attributes, and we haven't received any information yet about how they're going to deliver that legal compliance certificate, if you will. I don't know if it would come in the form of a certificate or not, but in this particular case, so for this one EUDR relevant commodity cocoa in the country of Ghana, we have had a statement from Ghana Cocoa Board, the regulator, that they will be verifying that the commodity is legally produced in their country only. There are other countries, I think in East Africa, that are doing something similar for coffee, but I don't have those details to hand right now, so I wouldn't want to comment on the what exactly it is that they're certifying as compliant. But really, it has to happen at the level of a regulator, and there's no other body really that I can imagine doing a nationwide compliance statement.
Okay, and just while you're there, so you're back from Ghana, you've been in the communities, you've been with the cooperatives, you've been working specifically with a couple of farmers that you know very well. What's the mood there with the farmers? Are they aware of the EUDR? Are they concerned? Does it concern them? Are they bothered if their beans end up in the EU or in China or other markets? What's the general mood from the farmers?
Tony, I really appreciate the question and the opportunity to speak to that, because, having just come back from Ghana and spent time, as you said, with farmers, I have to say that with the folks I was with, there's no conversation at all about EUDR at farm level. I mean, just absolutely zero. It wasn't a topic that I specifically raised on this visit. I have before on other trips to Ghana recently, but this time I didn't bring it up, and nor did anyone else at the farm level, really. And that includes meetings that I had with heads of cocoa cooperatives, and of course with farmers themselves. And so I do see, a real divide in every other conversation I have, with our partners in our compliance solution, with other folks who are working on the value added side of the industry, whether that be for cocoa on the chocolate side or any of the other EUDR relevant commodities. It's all we talk about is EUDR, but there's a real disconnect between the conversations that we're having at the kind of value added side, the operators and traders that Peter mentioned earlier, and those who are placing the products on the EU market, and on the farmer side, just really zero. And I think one of the reasons for that is that there has just not been a wide-scale community engagement strategy. We have a strategy in place that we can enact for any operator or trader who would like that service. We can, we have people ready to do community entry, to do community engagement, whether that's around high-risk areas or just simply to sensitize farmers that the EUDR is a thing and it's real and it's going to impact them. But really, there's just not been a whole lot of community level engagement that I have witnessed.
Okay, thank you for that update from literally from the ground level, from the farm level. Let's move on to the questions, because we really appreciate people sending questions in, taking the time to put the questions to us. So we'll, it'd be rude of us not to try to get to answer some of those. So the first question, which I can probably answer myself, and it's one of the questions that come in, is I wish to know the regulation incentives. Does the regulation incentivize any actions that promote an increase in forest cover and biodiversity as a result of an organization's operations, and what that stimulus is, if any? I did a little bit of research just before we came online, and there's nothing particularly on the EUDR's, the Commission's EUDR platform regarding that. But I did find an interesting paragraph in some paper somewhere in the depths of EC archives, which says the EU forest strategy is anchored in the European Green Deal, which I think the EUDR is part of, isn't that wider kind of remit? And the EU Biodiversity 2030 strategy recognizes the central and multifunctional role of forests and the contribution of forests and the entire forest value chain in defining a climate neutral and sustainable economy by 2050, ensuring the recovery, resilience, and adequate protection of all ecosystems. So it's part of this Green Deal. So they've got dates: 2030 strategy, 2050 strategy. That's what their targets are. So while really, and if anybody else out there's got any more information on that, that's all we can find on the biodiversity side of things of the EUDR. But it is part of the wider Green Deal. So I hope we've answered that question for the person who sent it in. The next question is, how do we ensure agroforestry and mixed crop farming compliance where crop rotation can easily be misclassified as deforestation? A very good point. And how do we challenge the outcome? Christy, Peter, whoever, both of you might have, there's two separate kind of questions there. Whoever'd like to take that one, please go ahead.
Tony, yeah, it's a really interesting question, and I think there are going to be, when the implementation date occurs, I think there are going to be a lot of issues around misclassification. I think the critical thing is, it's kind of regulations. It's kind of a pin in the ground type of regulation where on a specific date, you will have to have undergone some sort of aerial imagery, polygon mapping, to identify, firstly, whether there is forest on that particular piece of cadastral land, and secondly, if there is any forest occurrence on that piece of cadastral land, what is the extent of the forest, the health of the forest. The regulations give you quite a bit of guidance as to forest extent. So in other words, 5 meter height for trees, 10% coverage of forest and that kind of thing. So I think it's really about identifying the extent of the forest at the commencement of the regulations, because that is going to be information which will have to be kept by the farmer for the operator for a long time going forward. And I think if the starting point is correct, I don't think that there can be any real possibility for misclassifying something like crop rotation as deforestation, because if you're pin in the ground, your foundational work at the commencement is correct, and you understand the extent of the occurrence of forests on that cadastral entity, I think then going forward, it wouldn't be feasible for the EU to question that and to say that something like crop rotation equates to deforestation.
Good, thank you. Christy, have you got anything to add on that particular one, or is it?
No, I'm completely with Peter there, that it's just, it's the regulation is very specific about when you start your measurements. And we have our specific methodology of how we measure, and that is directly based on the regulation definitions itself on what constitutes a forest. And so, we apply, as usual, our methodology, and we follow the regulation guidelines so that we can ensure that, and of course that there's always some level of interpretation, even with the strictest guidelines on what constitutes a forest. But we have multiple teams, who are paying very close attention, using algorithmic methods, using manual analysis methods where actual human beings look at satellite data. And so we have safeguards in place to ensure that we're interpreting the satellite data as, in a true to life way.
Okay, thank you. And the EC do provide a lot of information on that land usage and definition on their platform, which we can maybe send out the link later on with this webinar, or put it on the ACM LinkedIn page for people that maybe don't know about this. The EC have provided quite a lot of information on all the points, but it's still a vague and slightly controversial legislation that they are forcing through. The next question, again, along with this, is probably the most frequently asked and the most one of concern, is in this multi-stakeholder value chain, who is responsible for the costs associated with EUDR risk assessment and mitigation? I think that's definitely one for Peter.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, absolutely central question. Of course, everyone is going to want to know that. I think that ultimately there's two. I think that the answer to the question falls into two parts. I think there's a legal component and an economic component. So I think firstly, if we look at it legally, the obligation to carry out due diligence and to certify that due diligence falls squarely on the operator, or it could be a trader. Once the goods are in the union, the certification is like a passport. It's carried along from trader to trader. But really, the first person who's responsible is the operator. It's the first person who lands the commodity in the union. So I think the cost really of carrying out the due diligence and providing the certification to the EU is going to fall to the operator, the first person who lands the goods in the union. So that's the legal answer. However, we all know how economics works, and that operator will, in all likelihood, allocate that cost along the supply chain, along the distribution chain. The great concern, obviously, is that operators pay less for the commodity because they now have an extra level of cost associated with importing that commodity into the union, or it might pass further down the value chain and ultimately end up with the consumer. So I think the economics of the supply chain is really going to answer that question ultimately, rather than the legal answer to the question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have some more questions coming in that we'll try and get through. We've got about 10 minutes left of this webinar. One which I could answer, excuse me, will the EUDR be delayed? No, but I've done a lot of reporting research on this, and I was speaking to an industry insider yesterday, and there's been a lot of chatter, of course, about it, and a lot of pressure as well, not least from the U.S. government and the Biden administration, worried about the consequences for them. But no, I don't think it will be. It might be. And I think it's going ahead. I think we have to be prepared for that. In what guise, what permutation is still up to question. We're still waiting for guidelines, technical systems to be in place. So there's still a long way to go, but I think it will come in on as planned. And even the EC, they've got internal pressure from MEPs and various groups in the Parliament, but I think it will go ahead. So that's that one answered. One for you again, Peter. How long does it take to gather the information for legal compliance portion of the regulation? I mean, you are not involved in that per se, I guess, but I guess what they're saying is, how much time do we allocate to this?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and again, it's related to cost, because all the time that an operator or a trader spends on gathering data, there's a cost component to that for the operator, for the trader. So I think again, it's really it comes down to the foundational work, and it comes down to making sure that with that pin in the ground, because remember, these certifications can be good for a year, they can last for a year, provided that if new facts come to your attention during the year, you have to report those new facts to the commission. But that foundational work would consist of having a solid understanding of the legal system in the country of origin within these categories: land use rights, environmental protection, third-party rights, labor rights, human rights. So it's really about having that knowledge. And as I mentioned, we are establishing frameworks for legal system for each of the big production countries. And it's really about understanding the laws of the country, because if you don't have that legal framework, you've got nothing against which to check your particular farmer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's another question. I'm just trying to look at my research on it. What will happen to my product? This is obviously from an operator producer at the EU border if I can't prove legal compliance come January 2025. The law comes in on at the end of December, doesn't it? But and I'm just trying to. I got a quote direct from the EU. If an operator or trader that is not an SME, so it's a slightly different regulation for the smallholders, placing the commodity on the market is unable to comply with the EUDR, they must refrain from placing the relevant products on the market or exporting them. So I'm not sure if this person meant, if it goes to the port to Amsterdam and gets, or I guess what they're saying is you need that compliance, that due diligence statement evidence, don't you, before you even attempt to export it to the EU?
Yeah, absolutely. The consequences are really quite drastic. If the certification is not available, product could be sent back. It could get stuck in limbo at the port of entry. So it really is a concerning regulation from that perspective, and for that reason, I think it's important to make sure that the due diligence and the certification of the due diligence does comply with every aspect of the regulations.
Thank you. Now we're getting a lot of messages coming in, a lot of questions coming in, and I'm sorry we're not going to be able to attempt to answer them on this webinar. We do appreciate them, and we appreciate your engagement. We will keep a note of them. Christy might answer some in a post, but we'll keep these with us, and we'll arrange. We've got a next webinar arranged in August, a follow-up to this. This will be our third. So we'll try to follow on with these questions, because I know it's of concern to a lot of people out there, a lot of people in the industry. So if we don't answer them today, because we're nearly out of time, we will get back to you one way or another with another webinar or in a post. So yeah, Christy, please, yes.
Yeah, thanks so much, Tony. I just wanted to recognize a comment in the chat from Charles Breponimo, who is with IDH in Ghana, and Charles said he wants to contribute on the discussion of farmer sensitization about EUDR in Ghana. And I just wanted to recognize that I have no doubt that IDH and under Charles's leadership in Ghana has done a lot of work doing farmer sensitization. And I may not have been, with those particular groups when I was just in Ghana recently. My own reach wasn't, like I'm only one person, only talk to so many people at a time. And so, but I just wanted to recognize Charles's statement here and say that we will follow up with IDH, and we will engage on their farmer sensitization strategy and share that information with our audience in whatever ways we are able to.
Great, thank you. And while you're there, Christy, let's as I say, we're nearly out of time. It's 30 minutes. It's a deep dive. It's a great format. It keeps us on edge. But obviously, we could go on all afternoon. We could do a weekend of this talk. But while you're there, let's just talk about obviously African cocoa marketplace. The EUDR is for every region, and I know there's Latin America, there's other regions, there's Caribbean, South America, but we focusing on really Africa. We are the African cocoa marketplace. But you wanted to point out as well, Christy, that we're not just involved in cocoa here. There's other commodities, and I think really an opportunity to tell us a little bit more about the Forest and Farmers First solutions and the partners that you are working with to help operators and producers navigate this whole EUDR and also getting their beans to the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Tony. So yeah, at African Cocoa Marketplace, our core mission is to connect buyers and sellers of cocoa products from Africa, with a global audience of buyers and investors. And so related to that work, of course, is supporting the sellers of cocoa products, which could be cocoa beans or any of the value-added products that you make from cocoa, to support them in their, compliance journey, which, of course, right now, EUDR is #1 on everybody's compliance list. And so, our approach and our method is to ensure that any supplier or seller who is working with us to market on the marketplace has the wherewithal to demonstrate compliance, whether it be with EUDR or any other set of best practices that a buyer would be interested in. And categorically, I think we're all familiar with the types of best practices at this point that buyers are interested to know about. When it comes to EUDR specifically, we do work across all of the EUDR commodities because we're in a partnership consortium with Origin, with Demeter Holdings and Demeter Ghana, and of course our friends at IDH. And so, thanks to the collective skills of the consortium, we are able to handle other commodities as well for EUDR compliance purposes. So, we have active pilots already in some of the other commodities. So, yeah, if we're here for you, I think is really the main takeaway that I'd love for you to get from this is that we recognize that EUDR compliance is a complex journey, and it's new for all of us, but we have been diving into this deeply, for the better part of the past year. And I think we're ready to be here by your side. So yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
That's great. I mean, as well, we've got your experience on the ground. We have ACM as Peter for the legal framework of this as well. So, and you've got your partners. We've got the partners as well. So you've got a perfect, complete solution, haven't you, for anybody watching this or watching the news, worried about the EUDR. They can actually they can get in touch with ACM, and you can kind of guide them through that, take them through it, and help them get their beans fully compliant, I guess. I mean, it sounds very close now, doesn't it? December is, and I guess people, the beans should, the market now is, the beans on the market should already be fully compliant. So that's a whole other issue to talk about as well. But we are here. Look at that, 12:30. I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to say thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, Christy. Thank you for everybody that We've had a load of questions come in on this, and we really appreciate that. And thank you for everyone that's obviously signed up and submitted questions. You can watch this online, on demand. It will be available, and Christy will be following up personally on LinkedIn with some posts. And watch out for our newsletters and subscribe to our ACM page, I would say. So thank you very much, everybody. See you next time.